Hey everybody, what's up? For this video, I'm going to play two different guys. The last couple of videos that I've made have been really aggressive guys, so I thought we'd try a change of pace. And this first guy is one of the sort of players that makes a lot of min raises and then stabs at pots. It takes a while for me to figure him out, and I hope you enjoy the strategy that I use to deal with this guy. Alright, first hand, 5-6. I'm playing everything from the small blind. So I limp. He min raises me, and I'm getting 3-1, so I call. Not a great flop for me. He bets 20 into it, and that's a pretty weak bet. I'm really not sure what it means at this stage of the match. Sometimes it just means I'm weak, and sometimes it means I have a very strong hand that I want you to bluff. But with 5-6, I'm just going to fold and move on. 8-3. Here's his second min raise, and I fold it because it's a pretty ordinary hand. I have had in the past a tough time figuring out these sort of min raises, but now I've got a decent strategy against them. He checks. I've got the nut flush draw, and it looks like he's reasonably tight. He's raising, but not raising too much, and he's post flop. He's not sort of overbetting pots, so he looks like a reasonably sort of tight guy at this stage. Here he checks, and I decide that seeing how tight he's been, I'm going to have a stab at this. I bet 20. That might have been a bit weak. I think 40 might have been better. And he min raises me. Not really sure I am on the hand, so I'll fold it. I don't mind folding until I've got a good feel for the guy. 4-4-3, paired board. I like to attack them, but apparently so does he. I've got two overcards, but I'm not interested in a paired board. And he's kind of chipping away at me, not doing anything wild. These little min raises, they can be a little bit annoying, but as I said, I have a decent strategy. And that strategy, I'll just explain it. It's based on how much they call. So if they min raise and attack every pot, I then want to know, are they also a calling station, or do they have a fold button? And if they have a fold button, then I'm going to re-raise them at sort of random points, or whenever I think I might be ahead. If they have if they don't have a fold button, then I'm going to re-raise them for value. Alright, so another paired board. He bets again, and at this stage I'm starting to think he's almost certainly just stabbing, so I make a little re-raise and he folds it. So it appears that the strategy of sort of re-raising him off boards that he probably hasn't hit is the way to go here, but I'm not going to overuse it. I'm going to wait till the blinds get a little bit bigger. I'm going to make sure I've had a good look at his play, and I'll use it at sort of select moments. Alright, Ace-8. He makes his min raise. I'm not into sort of re-raising him or anything like that. Another paired board. This time he bets half the pot. It looks pretty weak, so I call it, planning to push him off on the turn. He checks. Now I bet at the river, but too late. He's caught on the river. So I had a decent plan, but it didn't really work because I was out of position. And at least now I've confirmed that he is stabbing at pots on nothing, so I can sort of implement the strategy. Here we've got a huge draw. Just going to play it quietly. We call, we hit our draw. He can see the ace 2, 3, 4, and he bets out 20. This looks like a blocking bet. I'm not sure exactly what range of hands to put him on for this bet, but it doesn't look like he's hit the 5. It looks like he's got some sort of other draw, possibly a flush draw, possibly, for example, a 6 where he just wants to hit a cheap river, and I'm not really sure what he's got. He's obviously got something because he had no problem checking with nothing. I re-raise him to 40 just to see what he'll do, and he flat calls it, and the river is the 2 of clubs. He bets out 140, and this now has become, I think, quite an interesting hand. I've got the flush, so if he was just on a 5, which I don't put him on, but if he was on a 5, I could now possibly take a big pot off him or stack him. If he was on a flush draw, obviously I'm probably behind, or I'm definitely behind. If he had 2 pair, which is possible, I guess, then I'm way behind. So I mean, if he's got the 5, I want to take lots of chips off him and maybe stack him. If not, then I've got to avoid getting stacked myself, and it's very, very difficult to know where I am here. If I shove, I mean, he can see the ace 2, 3, 4. I might pick up a few chips by folding out a 5. I might get him to call and stack him. I mean, I'm sort of repeating myself here, but I'm just not sure what to do. So I make a sort of raise to 280, and he re-raises me now to 560, and you know, that sort of didn't help at all. I'm still not sure where I am, so I flat call it. A lot of you might be sort of screaming with the flush that I should be shoving, but I'm just so unsure on the hand. I flat call, and he turns out to have the full house. So I saved my tournament life there. A little bit conservative perhaps, but he didn't seem that far out of line that sort of shove was the right play. And it turned out right, so you know, if we're sort of results merchants, then I did good. Alright, he shoves his whole stack into the paired board there. I'm down to 550, but blinds are low. I sort of seem to be constantly in this 500 range on these videos, and I never give up. I mean, blinds are low, I'm just going to keep on fighting. Fire out 20 into the 40 pot, take it down with a very strong draw and overcard. He's back to his min-raising tricks. I'm going to call them on sort of almost any 2 cards. Another paired board. He checks it. He's looking weak, but I've got a little bit of showdown value. Now he's bet 20, very weak looking bet, but at this stage I'm not really going to be taking pots off him. I'm not going to be taking risks at this stage. Alright, another paired board. This time he checks so I can have a go at it. And I bet 20. And that's enough to take it down. And that 60 chips or 40 chips is pretty useful at this stage. I mean, that's pretty much 10% of my stack, so I'm grateful to get that. Another min raise, and I'll just talk about that. A6, 10, 20 blinds. I've got 25 blinds. I'm not shoving on A6 at this stage suited. I'm not sort of taking any desperate shoves. I'm simply going to wait for a good hand. I've got plenty of time. Alright, ace comes down. At this stage I think there's a big chance I'm ahead. He looks weak. I re-raise him and he folds. So now I know that if he's going to fold to those re-raises at the right spot, I can exploit him by re-raising on air. Alright, Queen 10-3, he checks. I check, and I honestly think I should have bet that. He's given up a lot of pots where he's checked, and then he sort of has a poke at them on the turn, so it would have been better for me to have bet that. Probably an error. The min raise strikes again. I've hit bottom pair, and I think this is one of those times where I'm going to exploit his sort of constant betting by re-raising him, and he folds, so that's a handy little pot to pick up. Takes me up to 650. And if you're playing these guys that are constantly min raising and then making weak bets, you simply have to choose the right time to come over the top of them. Here I call, and obviously I've got a pretty ordinary hand, but my plan is I'm in position, and on the turn, if he looks weak, I'll come over the top of him again. Alright, I do that. He folds and I pick up another useful pot. So we're up to 700. We're sort of clawing our way back in just by not being overly aggressive, but occasionally coming over the top when he looks weak and floating him. This one, it's difficult to float someone on a board like this. I'm not going to bother. 4-8, I limp. He's not being that aggressive from his big blind, but this time 4 times the big blind raise, happy to fold. Now we get to ace 10, and his raise to 4 times the big blind. I could shove. I'm not sure about his calling range, and ace 10 is a pretty good hand. My plan at this stage is to flat call and try and get the chips in if an ace is on the flop, and frankly, if he's got a better ace than ace 10, good luck to him. Alright, so I call. Ace queen 3, nice flop for me. Check it to try and induce, and instead of his little sort of pot stab bet of min bet, this guy actually looks like he's got something on this hand. He's made a pretty decent stab at the pot, and I'm going to follow the plan, try and get the chips in. So I simply shove him. He calls on queen jack, and the board runs out club, which I didn't need anyway, and I've doubled up to 1300. So I'm just going to repeat one more time. If you're low stacked, you're down to 400 or 500 and the blinds are still low, don't panic. Don't throw the game away. You only have to double up once and win a couple of pots, and you're really right back in it. And here I've gone from 500 to 1300 in a few hands without taking huge, silly risks. Alright, he raises. I've got ace jack. No doubt the aggressive viewers will be screaming at me to re-raise there, but I'm not going to. Here he looks a bit weak. I try a very obvious overbet to see if I can get any reaction from him, but he just folds, and that's fine. Queen jack suited, his min raise, and we completely miss. He makes a very weak bet. I could come over the top of it, but I've been doing it quite a lot, and now I've got a stack. I'm kind of slowed that down a little bit. Alright, limping with 4-5, and we hit a draw. I'm going to bet this. He's checked it, and he normally gives up hands where he's checked. So obviously betting's the right move there. Here on jack 3, he's min raise again. I'm calling that because I call, 99% of those min raises. This is a horrible board for me. And even though he makes a weak bet, I'm not going to try and take it away from him. I mean, you can use that play a few times per match, but if you overdo it, it's disaster. Alright, we've limped with ace jack, and flop comes down pretty awful for us, 4-4-2. Unlikely that he's hit it and he bets out pot. I see that as most likely a bluff. I could well be ahead there, but a little patience doesn't hurt. Alright, another min raise. This time I hit middle pair, so I'm a little bit excited I've hit something. And he bets out pot, and I'm going to fold that. I think he sort of bets big on boards where it's unlikely I've hit to take them down, but with a fair chance I've hit, he won't be betting without something decent. So middle pair, I'm not going to get too excited with it. Let it go. There's always the next hand. Queen 10 suited. We limp. Alright, not a great flop. He bets, and I fold. And here's just a note to sort of players, that if you have 2 overcards, a lot of you are calling, but no hand, no draw, no call. At the lower levels, I mean, that's a perfectly good way to play fit or fold poker, and you can make a very good profit simply by not sort of giving up chips when you don't need to and extracting chips when you've got a good hand. Simple poker at the lower levels is profitable, and by lower levels I mean I'm making decent money at the sort of $50 level playing very simple poker. Alright, I bet the paired board, and he gives them up, so any paired board that I get to bet on first, I think I should. We limp with 7-5. He checks, so I think this is a good bet, a good board for me to fire out on, and he gives it up. So I can pick up boards easily off him. I can pick up pots, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not going to take risks if I don't need to, though I will be looking for the right hand to make a play against this guy, because he will fold to a sort of a raise of his bet. King 3 suited. We completely miss the flop. It's not a good looking flop, and for some random reason I decide this is the hand that I'm going to make a play at him, so I raise to 90. He calls, and the most important thing, if you're going to make a play, even a fairly dumb looking play like this one, at least have the common sense to follow it up on the turn. So I've raised, he's called, which means he has something, but if I'm going to represent a good hand and invest chips in this pot, I at least need to protect them by trying to take it down with the second barrel. So on the turn I bet 150, which is enough to get a tight go like this folding, pick up a useful pot. I think that wasn't the best board to make that play, but it worked, and that counts for a lot. Alright, here we've got, once again, a paired board, and he bets pot at it. I'm giving this one up, but sort of later on in the match I'll be making a play at one of those for sure. We limp with 3-4, suited, got a nice draw here. He bets and I just flat call it. The reason that I'm flat calling it is if I hit my flush, I want to disguise it a little bit. People there that raise on the flush draw, they don't often get paid off when the flush comes. People will play you for the flush when you raise. So I just flat call it. Diamond comes. Unfortunately, I think he's got nothing, and I decide that I'm going to check it here and hopefully get some value on the river, but the ace of diamonds ruins my hand, and I just check it down for the showdown value. I don't think sort of anything was getting me any more chips on that hand anyway, so that's fine. I might have extracted sort of maximum value by simply flat calling a minimum bet. Right, another paired board. He's raised pre-flop, and he bets pot at it, so I'm sure that he's sort of bluffing those paired boards way too much, and for sure I'll be making a play at one of those soon. Here we've got a gut shot. I'm going to sort of call it and see how I can play on the turn. Maybe I can push him off on the turn, and he overbets the pot, so I'm going to give that up. And now he's getting a little bit more aggressive. He overbet the last pot, made a big raise pre-flop here. I think he's actually losing a little bit of patience in the match. Another big raise. I mean, I'm staying calm, and it looks like he's perhaps a bit frustrated that he hasn't finished me off already. Another big raise. And when people get into this frame of mind, I'm quite happy as long as I catch a good hand. If I don't, then it can be quite annoying to watch them sort of donkey shoving. Alright, King 6. I limp as usual. Another big raise to 150. That's fine. He can keep it up, and if I catch a hand, he's going to pay for it. And now he calms down. He's got a little sort of limp. So I'll punish him for that by raising, and that's my first raise in the big blind. Not on great cards, but sort of, simply perhaps what you might call a spite raise. Here with 5-6, I raise pre-flop, and The reason that I did that is because he's been raising so much, I want to block him from making a raise. And considering that I've raised on 5, 6, 2, 4, 2 is not such a bad flop. Gives me a gut shot into overcards. So I bet out 60, half the pot. And I pick up a nice little pot there. And he folds. Looks like he's gone back into his shell a little bit. Ace King, I limp. Board comes down. Not a great board for me. He bets, which is probably him just trying to buy the pot. I flat call him to see what comes. And I've got a nice draw here and 2 overcards. When he checks it, I put an aggressive bet in. I mean, there's no guarantee I'm going to hit any of those, so I'd rather take it here and now. Alright, pocket 3s. And no action. I bet because he doesn't look to be strong. And he immediately re-raises me, so I let that go. If you're beat, fold. If you're ahead, bet. There's a simple philosophy that will make you a lot of money. Alright, here we've got a gut shot. If he bets sort of not too much, then I'd be happy to push him around or call. And he bets 200 into the little pot, so he can have that. Here I'm raising, sort of random raise, no real reason for it. And he returns the favor. Alright, another random raise. I've got 5-7 off suit. He does his normal min bet. I call, and this is what feels like the millionth paired board in the match, and it's finally time for me to make a play at this guy. I mean, I've let him get away with all the other bluffs on these paired boards, but this is the time where I sort of drawn a line in the sand. He bets 200, and I raise him to 400. I think the min raise looks stronger than a raise to 500 or 600, and a tight guy will pick up that message, and he folds. So now we're back up to 1400, and things are going a lot nicer. We limp. We've hit top pair with sort of a fairly bad draw. He bets, which is pretty normal for this guy. That's a good card on the turn for us. And at this stage, I'm going to raise, which I do, and this is really to protect my hand. I think I'm ahead, but there's so many cards that can come on the river that are really going to hurt me. So I'll protect my hand right here and pick up a pot. We're in the lead. Got King, Queen. He raises. We just flat call. We disguise the strength of our hand. And if you remember a couple of hands ago, he made a 200 bet into a 160 pot, and I re-raised him minimum. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm sort of repeating the pattern. I suspect he didn't believe me last time, so I'm hoping to get a call this time. So he bets 200. I re-raise minimum. He calls. Now we get the 10 of spades on the turn, and I simply shove at him. I think I'm ahead with top pair. It's unlikely he's going to play me for a hand as good as King, Queen. I expect him to call me on sort of Ace of Spades or King of Spades, in which case I'm a long way ahead, and worse queens. So I shove. He calls me on the Queen 9, and that's the end of the match. He's gone from a chip lead of about 2,500 to 500, and sort of blown that with a couple of ordinary calls, in my opinion. So that's the end of the first match, and it dealt with a guy that's, making these min raises and stabbing at pots, can be a very different style to deal with, but the best strategy in my opinion is to find out if they've got a fold button. If they are good at folding, then you need to play back at them now and again, but not too much. And if they're not good at folding, then you need to wait till you've got something and then play back at them for value. This second match is a very short match, but there's a couple of interesting hands I wanted to show you. So I'll take it from the start of the match, and I've got Queen 2 suited. I limp as always, trying to get a feel for my opponent's style. Ace 8-3, he checks and I bet, trying to take down the board. He calls that, and even though I get a gut shot here, when he bets 20 I think I'll just let him have it. I don't really want to invest too many more chips there. Alright, at this stage he limps, he's not being overly aggressive. Hard to pick up much. I check, perhaps I should have bet there and just tested him again. He bets 40 into it, so I'll let him have it. That's a couple of gut shots that I've given up, but that's no problem. Got 6-7. We limp, he hasn't been very aggressive from his big blind. Paired boards, I love to attack paired boards. I fire out and he lets me have it, so he's being reasonably tight, not too aggressive at this stage. Hard to get a sort of feel for his exact style of play. And there he raises on Ace 9, that's a very reasonable raise. So he seems pretty solid. Alright, limps on King 7. I haven't developed a strategy at this stage. Another paired board. I bet again. This time he calls me, so he may have hit, or he may remember that I bet the last one. And when I check, he bets 80. That makes me think more than likely he didn't have a decent hand there. A limp on 9-9. At this stage of the match, I'm really playing it for set value. He makes a huge raise, and I folded up, and I'm pretty happy that I did, considering he had King-King. So he seems to be betting or over betting when he's got good stuff, and not getting too out of line when he doesn't so far. 5-7, low flop. He bets, and I'm sort of happy enough to let him have it, and there he had a monster with 2 pair. He got King Queen, second best hand so far apart from the 9-9. He raises to 60, so obviously we're going to call with King Queen, see what we can hit. And of course the flop comes down, Ace 7-2, and he shoves all in. And here he shows sort of the first signs of weakness. Shoving there on Ace 3, that's a pretty ordinary play. He's only really likely to get called by a better hand. So I think the cards have been making him look good, and I think fundamentally he's got a few issues there, shoving on that hand. So hopefully as the match goes on, we'll be able to frustrate him a little bit and get him to shove at the wrong spot, basically folding his Ace Queen. When you think about this, he's had 2 pair with the 10-2 hand. He's had King-King against my 9-9, Ace Queen there. He had Ace 3 where he hit top pair. I mean, he's hit a whole heap of hands, but my philosophy is lose the least on your bad hands, win the most on your good hands, and that's what makes you a decent player, and I think so far I've been doing that. Alright, 3-2, and he folds, fears the power of my 3-2, wise man. We limp with 10-2, and once again, big raise pre-flop. We get way out of his way. Last time he had King-King, and there's no way that we're going to be calling that. King 6, not a great flop. I check it. We're just being patient as usual. I mean, you probably hear in my videos me use the word patient over and over again, but it's the key to good play. Here we hit a 6 on the river. Just check. We don't want to get out of line. We've got a lot of showdown value now. and we pick up the pot. We weren't going to get anything out of him, I don't think. Queen 9, we limp, and here we've got bottom pair with a gut shot draw. I bet it on the flop, and he calls. Now that the king comes, I've got kind of two choices, or three choices I guess. I can check and see what comes on the river, which really just sort of asks him to push me off the hand. I can make a middle-sized bet, or I can make a decent-sized bet and try and represent the king. And I go for the aggressive option of bet 80 here, telling I've got the king to get out of my way, and I pick up the pot. Right, king queen again, he folds. 5-2, I return the favour. He makes a 3 times a big blinds raise on when I have my 6-4. I'm happy to fold there. And we're back to limping. Once again he raises, so he's getting a little bit more active pre-flop here. He limps on my 3-2. Not going to do anything silly like raise him there where, you know, I'm encouraging him to come over the top of me. He's getting a little bit more aggressive. I check my bottom pair. Now I've hit 2 pair, but there's obviously a straight in the board, so I'm not going to get any chips in here. And the river comes with a 6. Let's make just a tiny little bet there. That's a bet fold situation, so if he raised me, obviously I'm not putting any more chips in. Alright, 10-4, yet another a gut shot, and he bets 600 into a 40 pot. That's a pretty ordinary bet. So, just repeating one of my themes, getting the most out of your good hands, losing the least on his bad hands, and this guy's had quite a number of good hands and made very few chips on them, so he's doing the opposite of what I believe the right strategy is. And that's, you know, he should have a decent lead with all the hands that he's hit so far, and I think he's kind of minimized his lead really. He should be much further ahead if he played those hands sensibly. Alright, ace queen 4, I check. I might have taken a stab at that. That's the sort of hand that he'll probably fold. He bets 40 into it, that's fine, and he had middle pair, so really he's hit left, right and center this match. I mean, he's barely missed the board. That's how it feels from my end. We limp, another flop missed, and he checks, so we're going to try and take it down, bet 20 into it, and that's good enough. Folds to my 7-7, so whenever I have a decent hand, haven't got much action on it. Alright, he's raising, getting a little bit more active as I said, seems to have picked up his activity rate. I've got 10-8, limp, and we see the flop, another flop that doesn't help us, and he checks. We bet to try and take it, and now that he's called us, and the 3 is not a very good card in case he had some sort of weird draw, so we'll just play it quietly. Queen on the river. And I could try and bluff this, but, you know, I save bluffs for when it's right. And he had Jack 10 of diamonds he was calling on his gut shot. Here we finally get a decent hand with ace-ace. He raises to 90, and I immediately re-raise him to 360. You might think that the fact that I've made no sort of raises from my big blind, and I've made no raises from my small blind, might scare someone off. The $50 level, you might think that people would pick up on that, but he's not folding. He flat calls, and this is one of my favorite plays when you have a huge hand. There's a huge amount of chips in the pot, 720, and I fire out 150, and this is simply encouraging him to bluff. It's like a wounded fish in the sea, and you'd be surprised how many times guys think, whoa, he's wounded, he's not looking strong, I'm going to shove over the top of him. And they do it over and over again. They fall for the sort of same trick. I've re-raised them, showing them a very strong hand. Flop comes, I act weak, and they can't help themselves. Bang, all in. And of course I'm very happy to call that. And he's called a huge raise on King 4, and now doubled me up. So despite having a huge number of good hands, hitting a bunch of flops, he's now pretty much put himself out of the match. Alright, he's raising. Got Jack 9. I limp. He raises, and I just call to see a flop. Flop obviously isn't much good for me. Might have been a bit of a loose call, but I've got a big lead, and I'm comfortable that, you know, this guy's not playing that well. Here he limps. I fit middle pair, and I bet just to see where I am in the hand. He calls. The 6 is a pretty bad card, and I make a very weak bet again, and not too happy with the way the hand's going really. And this bet on the river is, you know, it's a blocking bet designed to stop him from making a large bet, but it was a pretty sort of ordinary blocking bet. Maybe 60 or 90 would have been better. He shoves me all in, or almost all in. He's got 30 chips left, and Ace 9 against the guy that's kind of been fairly random. Ace 9 suited, I think I'm going to take my chances. So I call, see a horrible flop, but obviously there's only 30 chips left. He puts them in, and I call, and we're actually in very good shape. He's got Ace 5, and that's the end of the match. And really the reason I wanted to show it to you was to show you that sort of play with Ace-Ace. People fall for that over and over and over again. And the other thing is that despite the fact that your sort of opponent seems to be having a run of great cards and you can't hit anything, if you just stay patient, eventually your turn will come. Alright, I hope you've enjoyed this video. 2 quite different styles, and you can see how I've dealt with them. Until the next one, good luck and take care.